On Tuesday, March 15th, Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb signed into law House Enrolled Act 1300, a bill that will prohibit charitable bail organizations from bailing out anyone who is charged with a violent crime in Indiana or is charged with a felony and has a prior conviction for a crime of violence. The new law aims to address the rising number of violent crime and will only allow charitable bail organizations to post bail for defendants whose bail is $2,000 or less. Joining us is Nikki Sterling, a staunch advocate for changes to be made in Indiana laws to regulate charitable bail funds ever since the murder of her son, Dylan McGinnis, by an individual who had been bailed out by the Bail Project. Nikki, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.
Nikki, you are the courageous mother of Dylan McGinnis, a bright young man whose life was taken from this earth too soon. You're here today to talk about the historic passage of Indiana House Enrolled Act 1300. But before we get into that, I would love for you to take a few moments to tell us about your dear son.
Dylan was, he had such a great spirit. He was selfless. He could light up a room. The moment that he walked into it, his personality was so vibrant. He was just a great individual, and, our family is just distraught about what, had happened in October, and it's just devastating to us to have lost him and, the bright spirit he was.
I am truly sorry for your loss. Now, your son Dylan was murdered by an individual who had been bailed out of jail by an organization called the Bail Project. For those of us that may not be familiar with what exactly charitable bail is, can you share why it was so important for you to champion for changes to be made in Indiana laws to regulate that industry?
We soon after Dylan's murder had found out that the individual that shot him had been bailed out by this organization called the Bail Project. And we really weren't aware that such organizations had existed and were present in Indiana. So my husband and I, we did our own research to find out what this organization was about, and soon realized that, their mission is to fight mass incarceration, to provide bail for low-income individuals. And while, the theory and the mission is admirable, what we had seen happen in the state of Indiana is that they weren't just bailing out, your individual shoplifters, that they were bailing out violent offenders from jail who are turning around and recommitting crimes, violent offenses on other individuals. We also realized that once an offender was bailed out of jail, that there was no oversight of the offender on behalf of the Bail Project and no accountability on behalf of the offender to report back to the Bail Project. So we immediately, it actually came to our attention that a bill had been presented in early of 2021 to regulate charitable bail organizations. And so we immediately began to meet and work with state leaders on how we could help support this bill, maybe get it dusted off and presented in 2022, and what we could do to help support that, the regulation of the organization.
Let's take a look at House Enrolled Act 1300. You recently shared how proud you were of the passage of this piece of legislation, and I quote, "Since the senseless murder of my son Dylan this past October, I vow to do everything in my power to save other families from the unbearable and preventable pain of losing a loved one in the manner in which I lost my son. In the process, I hope to carry on Dylan's legacy, which was all about helping others." And then you go on to say, in speaking of the partnerships you forged with legislators to get this bill passed, "From the bottom of my heart, I will never forget their dedication to public safety and to the memory of Dylan and the other victims and their families." Wow. From one mother to another, I can truly understand the heart, sweat, and tears that went into your advocacy work to get this bill passed. Can you explain to our audience what is House Enrolled Act 1300? And who were some of those legislative partners that helped to get this bill passed?
Yeah, so the House Bill 1300, it requires the bail project to register with the Department of Insurance. So there's going to be some accountability behind the individuals that they bail out. It also won't allow the bail project from bailing out more than 3 individuals over a 180-day period, and it will also prevent them from bailing out offenders that are in jail on violent offenses or had previous violent offenses in their criminal history record. A couple of the state leaders that we worked with co-authored the bill were Representative Peggy Mayfield and Senator Aaron Freeman, along with Jack Sandlin and Senator Michael Young.
Wow. And on working in partnership with those legislative leaders that you just mentioned, what do you say? I'm certain that there's some level of gratitude that you have for their support all along the way.
Oh, forever grateful for it. I think it's, from a mother's standpoint, what happened is devastating and unfortunate that, this organization was allowed to bail out individuals with those types of criminal histories. And, as a mother receiving that phone call that I received the Friday night that my son was murdered, Saturday morning, it's devastating. And I wanted to do everything in my power to see to it that no other mother or family would receive the same phone call that I received. Just an organization that I felt was operating recklessly in the state of Indiana, and definitely wanted to make sure that this could be avoided, if at all possible, from happening to somebody else.
Recently, David Gaspar, the National Director of Operations for the Bail Project, called the bill a direct attack on his organization's work in Indianapolis and, quote, an attack on those who are impoverished in Marion County, saying the legislation will result in more poor people sitting in jail at taxpayer expense without having been convicted of anything and not getting the services they need. What do you say to opponents of House Enrolled Act 1300?
So with the new law, it's going to require the bail project to register with the Department of Insurance. Prior to the passing of this bill, according to, there's an Indiana code, I can't remember the code right off the top of my head, I think it's 271024. They were actually operating illegally in the state of Indiana, meaning that according to the Indiana Bail Code, they did not meet any of the qualifications or guidelines to bail out anybody from jail. Second, I've heard the comment about it impacting significantly their ability to bail out low-income individuals in the state of Indiana. And I just only really want to add to that is if they are a violent offender, it will impact them if they are a violent offender. And if they are not a violent offender, it should not have an impact on who they are able to bail out.
And finally, Nikki, I think you've already answered this, but just to be clear, what do you say to our listeners that may say that you are opposed to equity in pretrial justice? That those that cannot afford bail should just wait their time behind bars until their case goes to trial?
I've stated in every testimony that I've spoken is that I do find that their mission is admirable to individuals that are, in jail on misdemeanor charges, or again, if it's a father shoplifting to feed his family. I 100% support that. What I don't support is the revolving door system that has taken place in the state of Indiana in allowing violent offenders to be bailed out of jail and put back out on the street with no oversight or accountability.
Nikki, thank you so much for joining us on Lakeshore Public Radio, sharing your story of advocacy and carrying on the legacy of your son, Dylan.
Oh, thank you so much.
That was Nikki Sterling, a mother and an advocate for the now House Enrolled Act 1300. For the full details of House Enrolled Act 1300, please visit www.iga.in.gov and under Indiana Legislative Session 2020, search HB 1300 Bail. And for Lakeshore Public Radio, I'm Dee Dotson.